Hi there. We finally found out the exterior filming locations in Northern Ireland, which are going to be used by the upcoming Tales of Dunk and Egg TV series. The second Game of Thrones prequel spin-off, officially titled A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, The Hedge Knight, it's Dunk and Egg, which starts filming in less than 6 weeks on June 3rd. And they've already cast Dunk and Egg themselves, played by Peter Claffey and Dexter Solansel. So this is really happening. This is imminent. And knowing these locations is important for two reasons. First, it gives a heads up for all the local spy reporters in Northern Ireland, so all the spy reporters know where to congregate and focus their efforts. Now, seriously, I hope that the old set spy infrastructure we had in Northern Ireland for a decade will come back for this, as well as new people that they didn't get anything to report on for the last show. We will be getting spy photos of this 6 weeks from now. This is right around the corner. But two reasons. The second is it also gives us hints about what parts of the story they're covering this season. And right up front, so far, we're reasonably sure they're only filming in Northern Ireland and at these 3 locations, that we haven't heard of any filming in Spain or something. So we don't think they're filming that much of King's Landing, if more than a few flashback scenes. We really don't think we're going to see Dorne at all yet. Which is, if you've been keeping up with this, Martin did say in his blog post, George R. R. Martin said, we actually do intend to show Dunk and Egg traveling to Dorne in the TV show, which in the novellas happened off-screen in the break between the first and second ones. But I've already made separate videos I'll link speculating on that they probably save that for Season 2. We already pretty much speculated they save that for Season 2 because so much of the second novella is through vivid narration retroactively explaining this is what happened off-screen with Dorne, with the Plague, with the Blackfire Rebellions, that if you put all that in Season 1, there wouldn't be much left for Season 2. So we're pretty sure that Season 1 will focus on the tourney at Ashford. That was a selling point, that it's a small-scale, local thing without too many extra locations. It keeps the story very focused. And going to Dorne isn't just, oh, go to Dorne. It's a plot-relevant thing that in the break between the first and second novellas, a plague breaks out that guts Westeros. And the plot explanation, well, how did Dunk and Egg survive, is they happened to be in Dorne at the time by pure luck. And they say the mountainous region, the mountains of Dorne and the mountains of the Vale of Arryn, they managed to close the mountain passes in time to quarantine. So by luck, they managed to be in a place that the plague didn't hit. But they explain that, so there's reasons for that. There's also stuff with Mad Lady Vaith, but on top of that, they need to show how did they survive the plague. And I also kind of want to show that there's this plague ravaging King's Landing. They describe, again, through vivid narration, that we had to use wildfire to burn all the bodies. It was terrible. Like, they should show that in Season 2. Season 1, though, Ashford Castle, Ashford Meadow, where the actual tournament takes place. And it's not just, when I say it's where the tournament takes place, it's not just a meadow where there's a tournament ground, where there's a oval for jousting. I mean, the way they describe it, when you saw that in House of the Dragon, well, they had a stadium and stuff, this whole tent city pops up whenever there's a big tournament, like a Renaissance fair, or a sci-fi convention is how I think of it. That, there's a guy selling roast turkey legs, there's food vendors, there's independent blacksmiths selling armor and weapons to potential, newbie jousters. So we have Steely Pate doing his thing. We have other entertainment. There's like jugglers. There's puppet shows like Tenselli's thing. So there's this whole Ren Fair that pops up around the tournament itself as the core of it. But all this other stuff pops up. So there's going to be this big, extensive tent city that they build in the meadow. It's not just going to be a meadow. They're going to build a lot of extensive tent sets there. Well, what was the specific news we got? It is a report from the very reliable fan site Redanian Intelligence from the Witcher fandom, but they cover this too, that we will be having 3 distinct exterior locations plus confirmation that the main production hub will return to Titanic Studios in Belfast. Which is great because, I've talked about this. The old HBO leadership really screwed Titanic Studios over. All of the people that we've been familiar with for years, is the crew members and everything. No loyalty there. That Titanic Studios begged the old HBO leadership, who thankfully aren't in charge anymore, begged them, please make more than one prequel pilot. If the Long Night one fails, which it did, we can't afford to wait 2 years while you start over from scratch. We'll have to take other contracts in the meantime, which means we won't be available when you're making the next prequel that actually does get greenlit, which is what happened. House of the Dragon, they were contractually unavailable, so they had to shift to Leavesden Studios, north of London, which is this huge production complex for Warner Brothers. This is part of the Time Warner complex and everything. They didn't get House of the Dragon because of that. So I'm happy that now, under these new people, that all those nice crew people that we saw, everyone from set builders, location managers, even just the regular crowd of extras that we don't know that well, but who were part of the show for a decade, the hundreds of extras in the Belfast area in Northern Ireland will be able to come back for this around Titanic Studios. Like, I hope Aberdolf Strongbeard comes back, that extra from the thing. That when you think of everything that those people went through, that you don't think of them as the headliners, like, the costume designer or the special effects people. I'm talking the lower level construction set and extras people. We saw a lot of them in that Last Watch documentary, that rarely do we get so much focus on them and all they went through. I have clips of that on the front page of my channel, but watch that whole thing. There's a lot I had to cut of just seeing how hard these people were working, who were just set builders and designers and things. So I'm happy they're going to be able to have the opportunity to get to work on this type of thing again, bring jobs back. But okay, they're using Titanic Studios. That wasn't much of a shock. This is all just preamble for 7 minutes. What are the 3 exterior locations that we know they'll be using, all in Northern Ireland? Not a wide range. They don't need to travel that far. Mostly just stuff in and around Ashford. So they're not even going to distinct parts of Northern Ireland that much. They're not going to the west, to caves, or they're not going to the coast or anything. They don't need to go to those places again. They're just taking short trips north and south of Belfast to County Antrim and County Down. First and foremost, in County Antrim, north of Belfast, the estate grounds of Glenarm Castle will be used for Ashford Meadow, which is the main location. This is where the tournament grounds and tent city are going to be set up. So most of the exterior filming will presumably take place at the grounds of Glenarm Castle. This will probably be, therefore, where we get the best spy photos, because they're harder to hide when you have, a big open-air tournament. But notice that distinction. I say the grounds of Glenarm Castle that they're using, not the castle itself. For whatever reason, architecture, whatever, apparently they didn't like the look of Glenarm Castle. It didn't match what they were going for, so they're going to use a different castle for Ashford Castle. Thus, farther south in County Down, the second exterior they're going to use is Myra Castle. That'll be used for actual scenes set at Ashford Castle itself, when Dunk goes in and is trying to get registered and stumbles upon Mykar talking with the others, or when he's imprisoned and stuff. So Myra Castle will be used for stuff specifically at Ashford itself. Now, the interiors are Titanic Studios, of course, but like the courtyard where he goes, oh, there's Arian Brightflame and stuff, that would be there, Myra Castle. Curiously, same report said that parts of Myra Castle will also be used for scenes set in Flea Bottom, the slums of King's Landing. My guess is because one alleyway looks pretty much like another, this indicates that they'll have flashbacks to Dunk's childhood as a half-feral orphan in the slums of Flea Bottom, but that these flashbacks will be relatively brief. I mean, if they were going to extensively show the streets of King's Landing to show what the Targaryens are doing separate from all this, they would have built an entire set for it, or they would have had an extensive exterior in Spain or something. The fact that they're just, let's reuse bits of a castle we were already using, like redress a wall or a courtyard and say, oh, this is a courtyard in the middle of Flea Bottom or an alleyway. We'll see it, but it won't be that extensive. So it seems they're pretty much matching what the novella did. That you might have a flashback of Dunk at just running as this kid running through an alleyway at one point. I'm guessing, but I think it's logical. That we'll get it, but it won't be so extensive that it's really going off book. We just find that they're not having these large, extensive, fully realized, dedicated, purpose-built King's Landing street locations, but we will get bits of him as Dunk the Orphan in Flea Bottom. Another interesting thing, unlike Glenarm, Myra Castle is actually a returning location from Game of Thrones, though not a major one. But it briefly appeared at the beginning of Season 4 as some of the exteriors for the Dreadfort, seat of House Bolton. And we didn't see that many exteriors for the Dreadfort, though. I mean, mostly when they did show it, it was either matte paintings of a landscape or interior sets. But we didn't see that much of the outside of it, so like bits of it, I think it's when people were arriving or the hunting thing, like one or two bits of it. When we actually see what they filmed there, we'll do comparison shots, but I'm telling you, it's not a major returning location. It's like, if you squint hard, there might be a reused wall somewhere, but you'd have to really look. So I'm not really hyped up about that as, wow, a returning location, that brief Dreadfort exterior we saw once in the beginning of Season 4. What I am excited about is the third and final location, also in County Down, a bit west of that. They're going back to Tollymore Forest. This is a prominent returning location from Game of Thrones. In fact, really, this is the only one I'd even mention. I'd even omit that Myra was returning at all, just because de-emphasizes this. Tollymore Forest Park was heavily used throughout the run of Game of Thrones. Whenever they needed to show a generic wooded area somewhere in central Westeros, they reused it for multiple things as a wooded area. I mean, similarly, Castle Ward, which is east of there in County Down. The grounds of Castle Ward are what they'd frequently reuse for an army camp somewhere in the open fields of central Westeros. I mean, by which I mean it isn't the north, it's not Dorne, it's not the mountains, it's the ongoing war in the Riverlands, but there's an open field. Let's have an army camp at Castle Ward. Sometimes they're in a wooded area, it's Tollymore. So much of the show was filmed there in terms of out and about in the war campaigns. Sometimes they did use Tollymore for very dense forest regions, though. I mean, other times they'd have, like, the Haunted Forest or Wolfswood, other stand-ins, but sometimes they just find a really heavy part of Tollymore and say this is one of the bigger old-growth forests in Westeros, the major forest, not just a wood somewhere. Particularly back in Season 1, where they weren't traveling around too much for expensive locations. For the very first episode of the very first season of Game of Thrones, before Winter is Coming, the premiere episode, Tollymore Forest is where they filmed the prologue scene, where the Night's Watch scouts get attacked by White Walkers. And subsequently, the first Stark scenes, this is where they filmed the iconic opening scene of Ned Stark and his sons finding the 6 orphaned direwolf pups. Now, Tollymore is a big national park, not like a structure like a castle, so I can't really say if they're going to the exact same spot where they filmed the direwolf pups or the White Walker attack. Or it is the same forest, the same foliage, general look and feel of it. Could they, just for the sake of nostalgia, actually go and refilm at the exact same spot to say that they did? Would they want to do that? You never know, but we'll see. But I'm even excited it's the same forest. So what are they actually filming at Tollymore? Because if you think about it, the Hedge Knight doesn't really feature forests that much. Obviously he sleeps under a hedge outside of the meadow, but it's not like a wooded area. It's near a stream somewhere. Why would they need an outright forest? And that's one of the most intriguing parts of this report. That's the one thing I was really intrigued by. Like, we can rule out Dorne, we can rule out extensive street scenes in King's Landing. All of this pretty much seemed to follow a strict adaptation of the novella, with maybe like a brief flashback to a redressed alleyway that's meant to be Flea Bottom when he was a kid there. This is the one intriguing thing, though. Redanian intelligence's report said that they're going to Tollymore Forest, based on scouts and casting sheet reports and stuff, their sources which are reliable. Redanian intelligence's report said that Tollymore Forest will be used for, quote, scenes set in the Crownlands. What? Well, that apparently would mean the Kingswood. I think it's a logical guess that by the Crownlands, the forested region in the Crownlands, you think the Kingswood. The big old-growth forest in the southern part of the Crownlands, on the south side of Blackwater Bay, which we actually saw prominently on House of the Dragon in episode 3 of season 1, when they devoted a whole episode to the big royal hunting trip there. That's the Kingswood. So this is apparently being used for a scene in the Kingswood. Why would they need that? Well, also consider that the King's Road, the big north-south highway, as it runs south of King's Landing, runs through the western part of that forest, the western edge of the Kingswood, before then splitting off. That the King's Road proper continues down to Storm's End in the east, and the western spur becomes the Rose Road and goes to Highgarden. So someone traveling from King's Landing to the Reach to get to Ashford Meadow would be going down the Rose Road. Through, if they had just left King's Landing, a day outside of King's Landing, you'd be in the part of the Rose Road, King's Road before it divides. It's in the Kingswood there on my map here. So I suspect this location might be used for a scene of people traveling either to or from the tourney at Ashford Meadow. Could it be the royal entourage of the Targaryens riding south? King Daeron the Good and Bloodraven? Maybe, but why not just show them, why would you need to go to a separate location in a forest to show that? Why not just show them on a highway next to the meadow scene at Glenarm Castle? Why would you need a forest for that? Could it be a flashback to some other point when Dunk and Arlen were traveling around? Maybe. If I had to guess, my strong suspicion, and I hate speculating, but my suspicion is that they might be using Tollymore Forest for the opening scene of the story, when Dunk is burying Sir Arlen by the side of the road after he died from a chill while they were traveling to Ashford for the tourney. Now, in the novella, Arlen died a day or two's ride outside of Ashford, in the Reach. The TV show might have just changed that around, that instead of dying a day or two from his destination, he died a day or two from their starting point, King's Landing. Why not? So that they then have Dunk take his body to the side of the highway while there's still, the highway cuts through a forest, have him bury him under a tree, and then go on to Ashford. First, I was a little concerned about that, but now thinking, I'm like, would that really change the story that much? Arlen dies on the way to Ashford. The only difference is Dunk would continue on alone, but particularly because the other guy died, he'd certainly have enough supplies to keep, food rations to get there. Or whatever. So, okay, he dies near the beginning of it instead of the end of it. Why would they make such a change? I honestly suspect they would want it, the showrunners would be doing that on a meta level. Maybe it was even George R. R. Martin's idea of, why not have the opening scene of Dunk and Egg, where we, in real life, not within the fictional universe, why not film the opening scene of Dunk and Egg where we filmed the opening scene of Game of Thrones? Obviously, these are meant to be in the north. I mean, where we filmed the prologue White Walker attack and the Starks finding the direwolf pups. Let's, in the same forest, possibly same location, film Dunk burying Sir Arlen. Though we say in context he's in the Kingswood just south of King's Landing on his way to Ashford. And the more I think about it, the more I'm so on board with this, I'd be annoyed if they didn't do that. Just for the circular nature of that and everything, that would be a nice touch, that this is essentially restarting, that these are a new start for everything, that we're telling the story right this time after everything that became a mess. I think that could really work. What do you guys think? That's the only thing I can think of. Why would they be filming at a forest in the Kingswood, in the Crown Lands? The highway going south to Ashford, to bury Sir Arlen. Purely for that circular trivia there. But otherwise, these are the only locations now. Later seasons of Dunk and Egg, of course, will have a wider range of locations. I mean, not that much at first, but like when they go to Dorne, which we think they're going to do by season 2. I mean, there's stuff in the Reach, even. It's not that widespread, and obviously even the stuff in the third one is a wedding somewhere in the Riverlands. Most of the early stories are in the Riverlands or the Reach, but eventually there'll be stuff in the North. As the show becomes successful, they might expand around a bit. And I don't mean expand to other countries. I mean just get different locations within Northern Ireland that they would go back to. You never know. So I think they might expand beyond just these 3 places where they're filming. I don't think they need to rebuild Magremorn Quarry because they don't have a big thing on the scale of the Wall set again or something. And hey, maybe some of those they could reuse with what they're using at House of the Dragon. I'm not really sure how that works when they have similar sets for similar things. But, I mentioned the modular sets and everything of Castle Ward. That's another thing. All 3 of these are kind of in a straight line along the south in County Down. I said Castle Ward is what they often use for field in central Westeros. Well, that's in the east near Strangford by the coast. You go west from Castle Ward, Myra Castle is near Downpatrick, and west of that is Tollymore Forest Park near Newcastle. So I don't know if anyone in the comments has gone on those official Game of Thrones tours, which I know include Tollymore Forest, but you could drive between these pretty easily. So when they're going back and forth between all these different locations, I mean, they're not using Castle Ward this season. They'd have to shuttle stuff between Ashford Castle at Myra Castle in County Down to Glenarm Castle Field, where they made the Ashford Tourney, which is in County Antrim, but these aren't giant locations for driving in and around Belfast. Hopefully they're not really out there in the middle of the woods where it's hard for people to get to, which means spy reporters can get there. So I am looking forward to seeing classic landscapes again, just in general, not just for nostalgia's sake, but because they were beautiful places. Getting spy photos from Tollymore, maybe even from veteran spy reporters who've been out of the game for a while. So a reminder, filming starts June 3rd. We are going to be getting spy photos from these locations in less than 6 weeks.